Good people, welcome. We are so glad to have you here with us tonight. And we're going to get started with tonight's mass call in just a few more moments. Before we jump in, though, I want to take a moment to give love to the team that makes these calls happen. It's more than just checking a demographic box for us. It's actually about making sure that every single one of us has access to learn from and with one another and build the power of our people together. So thank you for making this more possible, interpretation team. We love you. I also want to shout out On Point, all the tech and comms and design crew, every single organization that's represented through the development of these calls, and every single one of you who keep coming out and who have recruited people to join the call tonight. Good evening and welcome to this evening's mass call. It's been a wild and terrifying and super impactful month for all of us since we last met. And we want to look at the current events, but we don't want to do that without looking past the punditry and putting this political moment in a much, much bigger context. So thank you for prioritizing this call tonight and not regarding it robbery to build solidarity with one another. I want you to take a moment right now to holler at your folks real quick and tell them to come on and join us. Today, we're going to be hearing from people on the front lines of our movement about the work that they're doing to fight back and what you can do to do your part too. I'm Ashley Woodard Henderson. I'm your host for tonight. I want to welcome folks who haven't missed a call, and to our new folks too. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. We're so glad that you've joined us. If you're watching on Zoom, please use the chat to say hello. Tell us where you're calling in from. If you want to shout out your organization, feel free. And also, shout out to the folks that are watching on YouTube and Instagram and on Free Speech TV. Shout out to our friends at Free Speech TV. I'm sending special love to y'all and another extra special dose of love to folks who are watching the recording after tonight's live broadcast. One thing before we get into it, let's just be clear. When you fight for justice and liberation, there's always going to be some haters. And the more visible our work is and becomes, the more they're going to come after us. It is certainly upsetting, but we're not going to be surprised if there are trolls on the call with us tonight. So if you see any hateful messages in the Zoom chat or the YouTube comments or whatever, I want you to flood the chat with messages of solidarity and positive, loving affirmations. Because we remember that when we come together on these calls and in our work out in the field, we can disagree without disrespecting each other. So that's what we're committed to. And for our Free Speech TV fam, if you are watching and want to participate in the dialogue, just use the hashtag mass calls and tweet or post on Blue Sky, wherever you're at, and we'll try to incorporate you into the conversation. One of the most important pieces of these calls, in my opinion, is getting to hear words of affirmation and direction from the national director of the Working Families Party, my dear friend and brother, Maurice Mitchell. Unfortunately, tonight he's traveling, so he recorded a message just for us. To kick us off, we're going to hear him break it down, and then we're going to take a minute to get grounded before we dive into the rest of what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to toss it to our tech team to bring up Mo now. Y'all show some
Trump
love.
and Musk are executing the Project 2025 wish list, and they're doing it as fast as they can because they know they only have a short window to act. In moments of crisis, we seek to understand what it all means. While it's tempting to do so, we should not spend too much time trying to find patterns in their actions. What Trump and Musk have been doing is ruling over controlled chaos. They are at the same time moving with the ethos of future accepts tech bros while also trying to repeal the 20th century. Now, we are watching them gleefully take a chainsaw to the administrative state and threaten every part of the federal budget, from Medicaid to Head Start and even possibly Social Security. Now would be a good time for us to remember what government is. Our opponents have spent so much time telling us that government is the problem, that for some, their actions might make sense until at least the cuts hit their own livelihood or their state or their pet program or themselves or their friends. I'm going to say something that might surprise you. In many ways, the government is the problem, but it's not because of the employees who work tirelessly as public servants, doing everything from keeping our food and water safe to those educating our children and those caring for the sick or those hurt in war zones or natural disasters. No, no, this is a political problem because no matter which party has been in charge, where has the government been as the lives of working people of every race and background gotten harder? Jobs were shipped away. Communities were torn apart. Families were forced to move from the streets and roads and cul-de-sacs that they grew up in order to search for work only to find less certainty and more searching. And even those that have gotten ahead in this economy are reminded every day that they are on the edge. Even those with healthcare know that they are only one disaster away from falling off that edge. Even those who can afford to live in the right school districts watch as their schools have been turned into test factories. Even those with good jobs are reminded they can be replaced, they could be doged. The wheels are coming off the car very fast. The shock waves that are now being created from the wrecking ball that Trump and Musk are taking to our economy will not be easily contained. Tech bros like Elon Musk like to call this creative destruction. They like to talk about moving fast and breaking things. But they are not like us. They are the bad bosses and landlords that we have all experienced sometime in our lives. They are people who have never had to suffer the consequences of their actions or accept responsibility for anything. They have had countless benefits heaped upon them from the day they were born. Their actions will hurt millions and millions of people, whether they voted for Democrats or Republicans, whether they are Black, Latino, white, Asian, Native, or anyone. People like Trump and Musk have no concept of the greater good, and they will fight to protect their own interest at all costs, even if it means turning on each other. But no matter what else we think about our government, it is still ours. Unlike a privately owned tech company or an inherited family real estate empire, our government belongs to us. We can change it. We have changed it. And given the scale of the problems we are facing, only a government that we control can meet the needs of this moment. It is why we have to fight so hard to control our government. In other words, government is the prize. The problem is government when it's in the hands of the corporations and when it's not in the hands of the people. It is crisis moments that require us all to reevaluate and to get sharper in our thinking. And I believe that our party and our mission, building a working class vehicle as authentic and big and powerful as the people that could be a third force in American politics, is now more vital than ever. So here's how I want to ground us. I want to put your thinking on two tracks. Think of this as the beginning of the next chapter of our block and build strategy. The first thing we need to do is focus on the day in and day out work of long-term and place-based strategy. As a party, in states all over this country, we are aligning our partners and members and recruiting working class champions, advancing a pro-working class agenda in city halls and state houses. That is certainly a crucial piece of how we're going to get ourselves out of the long-term crisis that we're facing, governing with and for the people. But there's also an acute national crisis that we can't ignore by just putting our heads down to focus on the locality in front of us. We have to think about the bigger picture too. That's why we do things like mass calls, because one role of a party is to help make meaning in chaotic moments. Now, we'll be active in the media and on our social media profiles. And I'm speaking on podcasts everywhere we can to frame the fight that we're in and frame the stakes. It's billionaires, for us, billionaires taking control of the government with the aim of cutting taxes for themselves at our expense. It's why we're running phone banks to talk to voters in Republican districts and why we're leaning on the infrastructure we have built all over the country to hold rallies and protests aimed at Republican members of Congress in swing districts in places like New York and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. We need to be building a working class movement that speaks to broad majorities of working people that could fight and win power. Now, that means we can't react to every single thing. It means we're not always prioritizing what excites the quote unquote base we already have. And it means we need to be strategic about how to pick fights that will build our movement into a strong tidal wave, momentum that brings majorities in the doors of this vehicle, a governing vehicle for the all, into controlling the government for, by, and of the working class. That doesn't mean there isn't a role for all of us right now. There is right now. We are all part of what will fuel us to become a larger public force that informs, persuades, and mobilizes millions of everyday working people who are not yet activists. Now, they might not yet be the people who are ready to be in motion because they're not hyper news consumers, or maybe they didn't vote. But we need to build the momentum to bring them into the fold. Now, it's a terrifying time in America for sure, for so many. And it's also an important time to be part of WFP because I think people are looking for our leadership. They're looking for how to build long-term power and how to stand up to Trump. So let's show them.
Y'all heard the man. It's time to be about the work of blocking and building. I've seen you all in the chat talking about the multitude of tactics that you're exercising in this moment. When my ancestors and elders said by any means necessary, they meant by all the means. But if we just block and don't build, we won't win. If we just build without blocking the MAGA forces, our folks will be severely harmed in the process. So thank you all for your brilliance in the chat, and for being here tonight. You heard our fearless leader. He said that we need to ground ourselves in the local work while not losing sight of the national picture. We need to respond to this moment while keeping our eyes on the long-term prize. That is certainly hard work to do. So let's just take a moment to acknowledge that and to ground ourselves in the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, y'all. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose. Breathe in all the possibilities and opportunities of the impossible things that can be made possible if we are strategically moving together in this moment. Take that deep breath in and then breathe out through your mouth. Breathe out any concept of despair or hopelessness or powerlessness, which is nothing but a lie from the opposition in your head. We can win. They don't get to write the end to our story. We actually get to govern. What we do now will build the building blocks for us to be able to do so. There are so many things that you can do to plug into the collective work that we're doing to ensure that we control the terrain in which we continue to build our power. So if you haven't already, I want you to text mass call, MASS space CALL to 30403 so that we can get you a list of the ways that you can take action, up to and including the many, many, many calls to action that we have to share with you tonight. We know hope comes from action and not waiting, right? Faith without works is dead, and we want to build together. We're going to be talking about some of these calls to action in more detail later in the call, and we're going to share the links often while we're here tonight as well as after the call. So don't worry. I know that the chats are moving fast. We're going to be dropping links there, but if you miss it, do not stress out. If you're watching on TV and you can't see the links, don't stress out. We are going to make sure that everyone gets these links so that you know how to plug in. So I'm going to run through them really, really quickly. The first thing you can do is join the WFP call team. We're going to talk a lot more about that later tonight. You can, if you're new to the Working Families Party, join a welcome gathering, and we're going to drop a link to that in the chat. It's wfpus.org/welcome. The next thing you can do is text Musk, M-U-S-K, you know that guy, to 30403. When you do that, it'll patch you through to your senators and provide you with one of two scripts. One script if you're talking to a Republican senator, and another if you're talking to a Democratic senator. You can join in district actions to hold GOP members accountable in purple districts. We're going to hear a lot more about that tonight, too. If you're in Ohio, Wisconsin, or Georgia, I know y'all are here because y'all been in the chat, but if you rep for Ohio, Wisconsin, or Georgia, can I hear from you in the chat? Wisco ready to disco. Let's go. I see you. Shout out to Tamar. All right. If you're from Ohio, I see the OH. I see y'all. Georgia, where you at? I see y'all. Thank you for being on tonight. We want you to learn more about joining a wolf pack in your great state because we know that there are critical elections this year in all three of those places. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. You can sign up to do in-person canvassing shifts from March 22nd to April 1st with our friends Seed the Vote. Y'all remember them. Emily has been on many of our mass calls. We're going to show up and show out with Wisconsin WFP to protect the Wisconsin Supreme Court from Elon Musk's funded takeover attempt. We are going to beat back that billionaire attack on our democracy there. So if you're interested in that, we're going to drop a link in the chat for that as well. You can join a weekly virtual phone bank from anywhere that you are. If you can't be in Wisconsin, that's okay. You can call, do the phone bank from anywhere you are to support this vote in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We'll make sure that you've got the link for that in the chat, and we'll share it after the call as well. And last but certainly not least, you can complete the member survey that we're dropping in the chat to get connected to upcoming elections, opportunities, and actions in your state. That's at wfpus.org/member survey. All one word. I know that's a lot, but it's encouraging to me that there are many, many, many ways that we can be plugging into meaningful work right now. If you are one of the people that were like, yo, Ash, the block and build long-term strategy makes a lot of sense to me, but I want to know how I can block MAGA right now. I want to know how I can demand Democrats have a backbone right now. I want to know how we can build something beyond the failures of the two-party system right now. Tonight's mass call is for you. Well, let's also talk about what we're doing here, especially for our newer folks. These mass calls are being hosted by the Working Families Party. I'm a dues-paying member and proud to be. We've been highlighting WFP member organizations, allies, and leaders from across the country on these calls since April of last year. And as always, we want these calls to be grounding, to provide you with information and strategic orientation from movement leaders that you can trust, and to give you concrete things that you can do to get off that noisy hamster wheel of information, misinformation, disinformation that's being thrown at you and get you back to power building actions. So if you like what you see here and you want to be plugged in for more, you can text mass call to 30403. You can share that information with your friends, your family. Again, make sure you've texted mass call to 30403 so that you can get the bat signal to gather again. Here's exactly what we're going to do on tonight's call. First, as always, we're going to do some political education on our block and build strategy. Then we're going to hear more about what's happening in the court battles against the Trump-Musk administration from our friends at Court Accountability. Then we're going to learn about what we're doing to hold vulnerable Republicans in Congress accountable, including the actions that we organized last week when they were in their districts, as well as some of our thinking for the next time members of Congress are going to be in their home districts in the week of March 16th. Hold that date. We're going to come back to it. Finally, we're going to hear more about the WFP Wolf Packs, which is a program that we launched in earnest right after the election. We'll hear concrete examples of how people are organizing on the ground all over the country. And as always, we're going to give you concrete ways that you can plug into this work and take concrete action. Because we don't learn how to be strategic just to have a better analysis than the other guys. We learn how to be strategic to put it into practice and to build our power. All right, y'all, let's get into this good learning. So for today's block and build session, we're going to try to make some sense of this whirlwind that we're in. It's been disorienting this month as Trump and Musk and all the other weirdos have been waging war against our senses. Today, we want to put this moment in some historical context. It can help us understand where it's coming from and why they're doing what they're doing. To be clear, what we're not going to be able to do here is navel gaze or say it's always been bad, so why bother? We're not just throwing up our hands here or just going to treat this look at our past as some intellectually stimulating academic exercise. Our goal is to understand this stuff so that we're ready to fight. If at any point throughout this session you start feeling the feelings of overwhelm or anger, rage, or grief, that is perfectly understandable. Feel what you feel. Just remember, though, that we're in this together. You are not alone. And understanding the events of the past can give us a clearer picture of our present and ultimately what we need to do right now to get on our feet so that we can dictate the future. Before we get to that, though, let's take a moment, like we always do, to review some of the ground that we've covered in our past block and build sessions. We keep coming back to this slide because it's so incredibly important. We are in a political crisis, y'all. The two major parties aren't serving us. The Republicans have been taken over by an authoritarian faction, and both major parties are heavily controlled by corporate and ultra wealthy forces, both of them. Working class people are stuck with a bad set of choices. On these calls, we also debunk the idea that Trump won a landslide. In fact, his margin of victory was historically small. Somebody say historically small in the chat. Teeny tiny. This hasn't stopped him from trying to gaslight us into believing otherwise, though. We've talked about being in a united front moment. That means there are a bunch of different groups of people who don't like what is happening. And we're going to need to form some unlikely coalition to build Trump and MAGA, to beat them back, to build stronger than them. Because right now, none of us are strong enough to do it on our own, right? If we could individually do it, we would have individually done it. Throughout it all, WFP has a long-term strategy. We're organizing to create a new center of gravity on the political map to build and exercise governing power for, by, and of working class people of all races. That's the world I want to live in. This strategy is a constant. So even when we're building unlikely alliances to defeat MAGA, we still have this as our longer term vision, as our North Star. And if you like to see things represented visually, here's a simple picture of what that strategy looks like. We're starting out maybe small, smaller than we'd like. But as we organize more and more people, recruit more and more working class champions to run for office at the local level and win more and more elections, our center of gravity starts to grow. It starts to bring in people from other parts of the normally only blue and red political map of the United States. But here's the thing. The fact is that we're not the only ones trying to build a new center of gravity on the political map. This is what the MAGA movement has been doing all along. They disrupted the Republican Party of old, and as the last election showed us, they are increasingly having success in terms of attracting new kinds of voters into their orbit, including more and more working class people of different races. On a past call, we stepped back to look at why the political weather is so stormy right now. In many, many countries, there are a series of large-scale crises bearing down. Each of these storm fronts is creating new political currents and turbulence. Just this past weekend, there were elections in Germany, and the party that is the direct inheritor of the Nazi party tradition just achieved for the first time the position as the second biggest party in the German parliament. Sadly, we're dealing with a global phenomenon. Donald Trump stepped onto this crisis map at just the right time. Whereas his shtick may have fallen flat at a different time, he has now proven that there is real power and durability behind what he is doing, even if he tries to keep us distracted with his clown act. The whirlwind he has created is capturing the winds of crisis. It's creating its own weather. And now we're seeing what it looks like in the form of the government he has built and the movement around it. We're talking about the weird cocktail of Wall Street populists and Christian nationalists, libertarian tech bros, propagandists, conspiracy theorists, white supremacist members of the manosphere, and sycophants. They're all assembled in some perverse episode of The Apprentice, competing with one another for influence, making and breaking alliances, and generally playing fast and loose with our lives. So, obviously, in the short term, this is what we need to block. That means pushing Congress to step up and do what it is designed to do. Act as a co-equal branch of government, not just a bunch of enablers of a wannabe king. We need to challenge the Democrats to play the role of visible opposition in Congress. Somebody say visible opposition. The time for nuancing positions is over. Democrats need to grind the gears of government to a halt at every opportunity they get. And we need to be the ones that give them the backbone to do it. We need to make life very uncomfortable for Republicans in Congress. The town halls from last week were part of that strategy. We're going to hear more about that a bit later on this call. All right, everybody, y'all with me so far? I want you to show me in the chat if you're one in the number that's going to make these Republicans very uncomfortable in Congress and challenge Democrats to have some backbone in their actions to protect and defend our communities. I need to know I'm not alone on this call. If you are down to be one in the number, let me know that you are here. Catherine, David, Susan said, hell yeah. Amanda said, I am standing on business. I see y'all. All right, then I'm in the right place. Let's get to it. People are on board with the short-term plan, but there's still this question of how the hell did we actually get here? Some of you on this call may be feeling shock and a sense that we are in totally uncharted territory. And others on this call may have a sense that this is just another day in the life of the country that you know all too well. However, you're showing up to this conversation. We can at least agree that much of the mainstream commentary about what's happening is framing this as some sort of profound disruption to the way things should work. After all these years, there is still this underlying idea that with enough time, things will just go back to normal. And while it's true that much of the program of Trump and Musk is built around the idea of repealing the 20th century, a lot of this commentary is guilty of painting the 20th century as some sort of irresistible march of progress. That idea obscures the fact that every step of the way was a struggle, and none of the outcomes of the 20th century were assured. So let's take a new look at some pieces of the 20th century to understand the present. And spoiler alert, none of what is going on with the Trump-Musk administration is new. All of the ideas, from the push and pull of imperialism and isolationism to the contradiction of ignoring the courts and weaponizing them at the same time, all of this stuff and more was going on in the 20th century. Let's start with Teddy Roosevelt. And because the Panama Canal is back in the news thanks to Trump's pledges to seize it, it's a good place to begin our look at the last century. There were previous efforts to build a connection between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, but the U.S. government got involved in 1902. The land that the canal is on used to belong to Colombia. When the Colombian government rejected Roosevelt's efforts to access the land, he changed tactics in a way that will be familiar to anyone who follows the role the United States has played in Latin America. He staged a rebellion for independence in Panama to break away from Colombia, and he sent in U.S. troops to back it up. This was seen at the time, even in the United States, as a naked power grab. But Roosevelt didn't really care. For him, this brand of American imperialism was his idea of walking quietly but carrying a big stick, as he liked to call it. Let's fast forward. This may be obvious to some, but the idea of U.S. imperialism and isolationism, or America first, are connected. But if the idea of taking over the world feels to you like the opposite of retreating from the world, let's break it down a bit. Let's do so by understanding the complex tradition of U.S. isolationism, which is sometimes connected to the idea of U.S. exceptionalism. The history of U.S. isolationism goes all the way back to George Washington. He didn't want the U.S. to get tied up in whatever round of European wars was on tap next. Y'all seen Hamilton. The 1930s were a period where this tradition of U.S. isolationism was very prominent. With the memory of the First World War still fresh, people of all political stripes in the U.S. did not want to get sucked into another war. In this context, the America First Committee formed and became a powerful grassroots movement against getting involved in World War II. At its peak, the America First Committee had 800,000, I'm going to say that again, 800,000 dues paying members and prominent supporters in both parties in Congress and in popular culture. One of those supporters became Charles Lindbergh. He was an international celebrity for being the first person to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. He was also one of those Americans, and there were many of them, who openly sympathized with Nazi Germany. While there were many reasons that people got involved in the 1.0 version of the America First movement in the 1930s, Lindbergh represented the white supremacist and anti-Semitic version of the movement. In short, his view was that we should stay out of World War II because we shouldn't be fighting against white nations. Rather, we should be uniting against the more sinister threat of non-white peoples and nations. Sound familiar? Speaking of white nations, let's fast forward again. We all know that by the 1950s, grassroots movements were stirring to challenge American apartheid. People were organizing to fight the centuries-long effort to keep those with white skin at the top of a racial hierarchy in the United States. Shout out to the Black Liberation Movement. Shout out to the American Indian Movement and so many others. A major breakthrough in that struggle was the Supreme Court's Brown versus the Board of Education decision to desegregate schools. Y'all know that decision. The Brown decision also launched a new era of white backlash politics that it's still with us today. We see it in the form of the school choice movement. And now even with Trump's calls to abolish the whole entire Department of Education. Vice President Vance recently made headlines for citing the "let them enforce it" quote that is attributed to President Andrew Jackson. Jackson supposedly said this when he defied the Supreme Court in order to forcibly relocate indigenous nations on the Trail of Tears. We can see an example of this "let them enforce it" mindset in the reaction to the Brown decision by the court. Here we have Senator Harry Byrd, a key architect of the Southern campaign of massive resistance to the court's order. In this campaign, the white power structure showed that they would rather let schools close down than integrate. They would rather throw out the idea of universal public education than see a world where there was equal access to the benefits of society for all races. But why defy the courts when you can control them? Trump, like any mob boss, knows the value of having judges on the payroll. And the U.S. conservative movement has known this for a long time, too. Here is Lewis Powell. This quote comes from a secret memo he wrote counseling the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on how to build political power to, as he put it, protect and preserve the system. Not long after writing this memo, Powell was put on the U.S. Supreme Court by President Nixon. As a result of Powell's call to arms, the conservative movement began building infrastructure to, among other things, systematically take over the courts at every single level, a project that they have been pursuing for several decades now. So, again, let's break all this down. The long story short of it, the too long didn't read, the TLDR, is that none of this is new. From the brazen imperialism wanting to take over the world to the isolationism and America First tendencies, from the blatant acts of ignoring the courts to the systemic project of weaponizing the courts against any effort that would result in greater fairness in our society. All of this stuff has been present with us for a long, long time. The 20th century was not some inevitable march of progress that is now being interrupted by a foreign influence. There were people who fought against this progress every single step of the way. They were clear on power and they had no embarrassment about using it. In short, the progress of the 20th century that Trump and Musk want to overturn was won through our struggle. It all boils down to this: we are in a struggle against the rule of the few over the many. And only with a mass movement will we succeed in blocking it and building the world that we've always deserved. There is no one coming to rescue us, good people. We are the ones who have to pick up the mantle of struggle and do the work that is necessary. I need you to tell me that you are ready to do the necessary work. If you are ready to do the necessary work, say, I am ready in the chat. I need to see it. I need to know it. I'm seeing that you're ready. That means I'm ready too. I want to be in this with you. If you like these political education sessions that we've been doing on these calls, we're posting the recordings on the WFP website. You can find it at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. We'll drop the link to that in the chat. And again, if you don't get the chat, we will make sure that you get sent out all of these links. All I need you to do is text mass call to 30403. We'll get them to you. And we've also put downloadable versions of all of the slides and all of my speakers' notes for all of these political education sessions right there on the website. You can find and download materials at www.workingfamilies.org/mass calls. We'll drop the link for that in the chat one more time. Again, we want you to use this. So however it is useful, feel free to take the recordings of the calls, the scripts, the slides, all of it, and use it for the betterment of your community. All right. If you're feeling called to join the struggle like I am, then I want you to remember that there are concrete things that you can do right now to get involved with us. In a second, we're going to hear from speakers and break these actions down a little bit more. But again, here's the whole list, which we'll also send to you after this call. You can join the WFP call team. You can join a WFP welcome gathering. We can't wait to welcome you into our movement. You can text Musk to 30403, again, MUSK to 30403, which will patch you through to your senators. We'll make sure that you get a script, whether you're talking to a Republican senator or a Democratic senator. You can join in-district actions to hold GOP members accountable in purple districts. If you're in Ohio, Wisconsin, or Georgia, we'd love for you to learn more about joining a wolf pack in your state and taking action in critical elections this year. You can sign up to do in-person canvassing from March 22nd to April 1st with Seed the Vote, our sisters, and with Wisconsin WFP, our kin folk, to protect the Wisconsin Supreme Court from an Elon Musk-funded takeover attempt. You can join the weekly virtual phone bank if you can't get there in person to help us get out the vote in Wisconsin, particularly around this Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And if you can't do any of that, you can complete the member survey so that we can keep you connected to upcoming elections, opportunities, and actions in your great state. Y'all, now I have an opportunity to bring up our first speaker, the beloved Lisa Graves from Court Accountability. Court Accountability is dedicated to combating corrupt abuse of judicial power and building movement capacity to sustain a democratizing constitutional agenda. Lisa works for True North Research, Court Accountability's sister investigative watchdog group. She works with journalists and others to shine a light on those fueling regressive agendas targeting our freedoms. Lisa is one of the nation's foremost experts in exposing how special interests distort public policy and try to thwart the public's interest in a thriving democracy and on a healthy planet. Lisa has worked in government and Congress, and she's testified many times before Congress. So if you see her face and it looks familiar, that might be why. Her work is cited by countless media outlets, and she has a new podcast called Grave Injustice if you want to hear more from her. Lisa, catch us up on what's going on with the courts and what regular people can do about it.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley. It's truly an honor to be here tonight with you all. And I am here to tell you a little bit more about what we're seeing with the courts. As you mentioned, we shine a bright light on the corruption that has engulfed the U.S. Supreme Court and the sorts of decisions this court has been issuing since Donald Trump managed to put three new justices on that court, which has led to the crises that we're facing right now. The fact is that right now, as Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his other agents or non-employees, it seems, have been wreaking destruction across the federal government, issuing executive orders and edicts, firing people, freezing money, redirecting activities that were already approved by Congress, by our representatives. Those battles are being fought out in the courts. And right now, at the lower court level, the courts are holding, meaning for the most part, as these lawsuits have begun, where these challenges to these lawless actions, actions in violation of statutes and the Constitution and more, are proceeding the courts, the lower court judges are, for the most part, doing their job, following the law, trying to protect the interests of the American people. We can see that, for example, in the reaction of the courts to Donald Trump's declaration that people who are born here aren't automatically citizens in his new revision of our 14th Amendment. That's been immediately rejected by some of the courts in the country because it goes against the actual language of the Constitution and the sacred right we have as citizens born here in the United States. We've also seen courts responding to these orders to fire people, fire inspectors general, fire employees without cause, capriciously, arbitrarily, in violation of longstanding rules and labor agreements and more. The courts are responding to those efforts, looking at those cases right now. And we're also seeing litigation over the most recent set of declarations trying to bar trans people from serving in our military. So those battles are happening in the courts, and those are important battles to vindicate the laws that exist on the books. But ultimately, those cases are going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court is not necessarily going to save us. In fact, from what we've seen with this court is what got us here. We have a court led by John Roberts, who is the Chief Justice of the court, 6 Republican appointees on that 9-person court. And last year, they paved the way for Donald Trump's return to power by blocking states from following the 14th Amendment and its bar on insurrectionists holding office, and by issuing an order that declared that Donald Trump had immunity from criminal prosecution, unprecedented, untethered immunity, not mentioned in the Constitution, contrary to history and precedent and more. And that was orchestrated by John Roberts himself in the months before the election in a way that signaled to the American people that he did nothing wrong and could do nothing wrong, and that paved the way to this very dangerous circumstance we're seeing right now, where he seems to believe that he can do nothing wrong. And in fact, Donald Trump and his allies, through the work of the operatives of Project 2025, are acting as if they already have impunity. They're acting as if the Supreme Court will rule in their favor and allow them to enact this theory, the so-called unitary executive theory that would allow the president to fire anyone on any board, any agency, any park ranger, anywhere in the country for any reason or no reason. And so the courts are not going to save us. We have to continue to build this movement. We have to continue to take back our power from the courts and shore up our elected representatives to speak out on our behalf. What's happening right now with the efforts in these town halls, mobilizing for the town halls, calling elected officials, both at the federal and state level, demanding that they stand up for our rights, organizing for the months and year ahead so that we can restore some checks and balances against this autocratic rule. These are all vital efforts. And I'll conclude just with 2 quotes. One from one of my mentors who said, when we're faced with difficulties, the question is, will we hesitate and stop in our tracks, or will we muster up courage and charge ahead? Herein lies the key to victory or defeat. And then in the words of my hero, Frederick Douglass, power demands nothing. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, and it never will. And so I'm so grateful for all of your efforts to make those demands until we can make headway, make progress, the progress that we are destined to make in response to the crises that we're facing. Thank you, Ashley.
Y'all give it up one time for Lisa Graves. She quoted the great Frederick Douglass, said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." I would add what Charlene Carruthers added with her book, Unapologetic, that power concedes nothing without an organized demand. And then I'd put an Ashley Henderson little remix on it and say, power concedes nothing without an organized demand and a consequence. And Lord, prepare me to be the consequence in this season, y'all. Let's do it. You heard what Lisa said. We need to fight for courts that are actually going to uphold the rule of law and not sit there thinking everything is just fine when the house is actually on fire. We also need to build a party that can get working class champions elected so that the rule of law isn't just repressive and oppressive in the first place. If you want something you can do right now to join this struggle, I want to share with you that WFP is right now fighting to protect the Wisconsin Supreme Court from an Elon Musk takeover. I told you we were going to talk about this more later on the call. Now is the time. And that is not hyperbole. Elon Musk's Political Action Committee just dropped $3 million into Wisconsin to try to install another corrupt right-wing judge onto the Wisconsin court. Thanks to our work not too long ago, we were able to wrestle the Supreme Court out of the hands of a 4-3 conservative majority. But in an election in just a few weeks, y'all, the Republicans are trying to flip the court back in their favor, which is why Elon is emptying out his couch cushions to drop some major coin on that state. So everything is on the line in Wisconsin, from abortion rights to labor rights to fair election maps. And did I mention the election is just around the corner? You can do a couple of things. The first is you can actually travel to Wisconsin at the end of March to help us with our Get Out the Vote campaign. Our friends at Seed the Vote are coordinating that effort. If you might be down to travel to Wisconsin, can you just holler at me in the chat? I see folks offering places to stay. I see you. If you think you can get there, let me see you. Emily said she would go from Iowa. Thank you. I see Jillian saying, I'm already planning on being there. Reverend Donna said, yes. I see a bunch of y'all. So we've got folks that are going to mobilize to Wisconsin at the end of March to make sure that we get the votes out. If you're traveling to Wisconsin, that is incredible. But for those of us that can't get to Wisconsin, if it's not in the cards for you, you can join a virtual phone bank. I've already seen folks saying that they could phone bank. You can join a virtual phone bank to Wisconsin voters from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, which the Wisconsin team is running every Wednesday night. Every Wednesday night, they're going to have a phone bank. So if you know people in Wisconsin, sign up to send personalized postcards to remind your friends to vote through WFP. There's no printing or posted needed. So you can send postcards, you can phone bank, or you can get to Wisconsin and hit the doors with us. We'll drop the links to those actions in the chat now, and we will send them out after this call as well. We're going to keep pushing because I see the time and I want to be a good steward of your time. I get to bring up two people who I am incredibly in awe of. I'm going to bring up Isabel, who is Working Families Party's Federal Affairs Strategist, and Melita from North Salem, New York, a public school parent who spoke at our rally in the New York 17th Congressional District. And I have to say, it's my understanding that Melita's mom is on the call. So we also want to shout out to Melita's mommy. Thank you for sharing with her with us tonight. Isabel, I want to start with you. Can you share an overview of the work that the Working Families Party did last week and continuing into this week to turn up the pressure on congressional Republicans all over the country and how folks can support and amplify that strategic work?
Yeah, thanks so much. This is such an energizing space to be in tonight. I'm going to start with just a little background on what's going on with the budget fight right now. Trump, Musk, and the Republicans in Congress are attempting to pass this budget right now through reconciliation that's going to slash really $1 trillion. I had billions here, but it's $1 trillion in essential programs to fund huge tax cuts to the ultra rich. On Tuesday, they passed a budget blueprint through the House that would require $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid, along with a huge number of cuts to other major programs. The budget process still requires a bunch of more additional steps. So there's going to be reconciliation between the House and Senate, details on what actually is going to be cut. and then another vote on the House floor. So we have a lot of opportunities to continue to fight against these cuts. Our current Republican accountability program is targeting a set of vulnerable House Republicans. These are members who won their seat by narrow margins, and they're also in states where WFP has made a long-term investment in building power. So these are part of not only this program, but part of a longer-term power building plan. We're targeting these seats because there are two opportunities to win here. The first is by pressuring these Republicans to break with Trump and vote against these cuts. So, as Ashley was referencing, we've been really applying the pressure there. Many of these members position themselves as more moderate. They're electorally vulnerable, and they know that. And Republicans in swing seats over the last couple of weeks have really been indicating that they're worried about how they vote on this impacting their chances of reelection. We know it's an uphill battle to get them to vote to break with Trump. That loyalty is really strong. But we only need 2 or 3 of them to break on any of these votes to stop them from passing. The second opportunity that we have is when they choose not to stand with working people, we can make sure they lose their seats in reelection. These are people who won with really narrow majorities, and if they don't do the right thing, we're going to make sure that they don't go back to Congress in 2027. Just a little recap of some of the outreach we've been doing in these districts. We're doing large-scale voter outreach efforts in all of these districts across the country to make sure that these representatives understand that their voters are going to hold them accountable. 2 examples of those are last week, we held a series of rallies in 5 districts across the country with large numbers of constituents calling on their members to do the right thing, meeting with their members and their members' staff, and getting media attention from local outlets in all of these districts. We've also been hosting rapid response phone banks as news breaks around the budget fight. Volunteers, including many of you all here, have made over 250 calls to voters in these districts to patch them through to their members of Congress and share what they believe about this fight. And those phone banks have resulted in thousands of patch throughs in 3 weeks. There's a lot more to be done here. This is going to be a fight that's going to go on for at least 2 more months. It's hard to know exactly how long it's going to go on. These phone banks are planned in rapid response, as are the actions. So it's hard to know exactly what the timing is going to look like, but there will be a lot to do between now and when the final votes happen, sometime probably in April, although again, hard to know. So the links that we've been sharing in the chat, the phone team is the way to know when the next phone banks are going to be coming up. Those will be planned in rapid response. So sign up for that, and we will let you know as soon as we know when we're going to be doing these. And I believe we're also sharing a form to get involved in these districts. If you live near them, if you know people who live near them, if you live in these districts, let us know, and we will get you plugged in with the really critical on the ground work that's happening.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and thank you to the team, y'all. Y'all been turning out thousands of people to these WFP phone banks, y'all. It is unheard of. I'm like, I can't even imagine what 2,200 people on a phone bank all at the same time feels like, but y'all have been posting all over social media and tagging me and Mo and WFP in it, and it's been beautiful. So keep it up. We're going to make sure to drop those links in a second. I'll remind you how to sign up. But before we do that, Melita, I want to kick it to you again. I want to shout out to your mama for sharing you with us tonight. Thank you, and thank her for her incredible work in New York. I want you to share your perspective as a resident of one of the districts where these Republican accountability actions took place. What was it like, and how do you feel like it is shifting the tenor of our movement building where you're from?
Well, first, I want to say thank you to all the speakers who have shared before me and to you, Ashley, for hosting. I want to start off by saying when we fight, we win. I'm a resident of North Salem in New York. I'm represented by a GOP Senator, Mike Lauer, who's in a swing seat. He's also rumored to be going for governor of the great state of New York. And so, I'm new to advocacy, but I'm a mother of 4, three of my children, go to school under the Department of Education. My youngest receives subsidized childcare and is in a Head Start program. And I participated in a rally alongside other members of the WFP last week in front of Congressman Lauer's office. And we rallied against the cuts being proposed by the Trump administration and the unprecedented access and actions of the non-elected or appointed billionaire Elon Musk. Being a working mother whose children depend on the services provided by Department of Education and Medicaid, because my oldest son is autistic. The attacks on these systems are direct attacks on my children's lives and futures, but also on countless other families with some of the most vulnerable children. And what do we do when people threaten our children? What do we do when people threaten our most vulnerable people? We act. We fight, and we fight to win. So I'm speaking tonight to stand up and to encourage people to demand that the officials who've accepted the tax of representing us, our neighbors, our family members, that if they're not on board, this is not a Fortune 500 company. They're not here to protect and serve shareholder and personal agendas, right? They're public servants who are tasked with representing us, our lives, liberty, and freedoms. And if they're not willing to do so and align with us, we must demand that they be voted out of every local, state, national seat. And I want to I want to read a poem that we're probably all familiar with from Martin Niemöller. And I'm sure, like I said, most of us have heard it, but it's really relevant, especially now. And it goes, first they came for the communists and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. And again, I just want to remind everyone who's participating on this call, don't let your voices go unnoticed. Don't be unheard. We're tasked to speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. And again, when we fight, we win. Thank you all.
You better let them know it. When we fight, we win. This is not the end of the story. Also, I have to say, all the mama bears in the chat got lit when you were like, what we do? They was like, oh, we fight them. We effing fight them. So you're getting a lot of love in the chat. Thank you, Melita. Thank you, Isabel, for being here. People, you heard it here and you've seen it on Free Speech TV with your own eyes. The pressure on these Republicans is working, and we're not going to let up, y'all. Like, I say this coming from a red state, that I often have felt like, oh man, there's nothing I can do. These Republicans don't listen to me anyway. But what we're seeing is that it actually really does matter. That if you are going to build political power, part of it is combating the Republicans and giving them pressure. And that pressure is working. Now's not the time to let off the gas. Now's the time to keep putting that pressure on. And members of Congress are going to be back in session now, but they're going to go back home to their districts during the week of March 16th. Remember, I told you to hold that date. Mark your calendars now, March 16th. We've got some more big stuff planned for this next congressional recess that starts on March 16th. I need you to remember that date. Can you put it in the chat so I know you heard me? March 16th. You're going to mark it on your calendar now, March 16th. Okay, I see you. Stay tuned for more updates, but no, we're going in big, right? In the meantime, we're going to drop links to immediate actions that you can do to join our Republican accountability work. So again, like Isabel said, you can join the WFP call team. We're going to drop that link in the chat. And again, you'll get all of these links afterward too, especially for our folks that don't join us on Zoom. We'll make sure that it gets sent out. If you text mass call to 30403, you will get all of these links. The second thing you can do is text MUSK, M-U-S-K, to 30403. When you do, it's going to patch you through to your senator, and it's going to provide you with one of two scripts, either a script for Republican senators or a script for Democratic senators. And then you can join in-district actions to hold GOP members accountable in purple districts. You can get there by going to wfpus.org/GOP accountability, all one word. So again, join the WFP call team, text MUSK to 30403, join in district actions to hold GOP members accountable in purple districts. Now, before I turn it over to my next speakers, I have to do something that you all are doing in the chat. I did it at the top of the hour, but they have been working, and y'all keep saying how beautiful and brilliant and wonderful they are and how grateful you are that they are here. Can we give it up one time for our interpretation team? Shout out to Rachel. Shout out to Coffee. I mean, like when I tell you this team, our interpretation team for almost a year now has been holding us down, even with the rapid response calls, even on the long calls, they show up and they show out for us. So can we give some love to the interpretation team tonight? They're shouting y'all out with rigor and discipline in the chat. We love you. Second group of people I want to shout out before I toss it to the next group of speakers are the folks that are dropping the links in the chat. They have the hardest job in show business because they drop it and then people are like, well, where are the links? And then they drop it again and then they're like, where are the links? So I just want to shout out the folks who have been doing that unthankful, ungrateful work. I want to shout out Destiny. Shout out to Destiny. Show some love to Destiny. And shout out to Kramer. We appreciate y'all so much. They are very relevant to the next conversation because they're members of our Wolfpack. So the next three speakers I'm going to bring up are Dylan. Dylan is WFP's organizing team director. Y'all show some love for Dylan. I'm going to bring up Sam, WFP's national distributed organizer, and Uj, a leader in the Illinois Wolfpack. Y'all know it as the Prairie Dogs. Can y'all show some love for Dylan, Sam, and Uj? And if you're here with the Prairie Dogs, shout your team out in the chat. Dylan, I want to toss it to you, and Sam, I want you to jump in here too. Y'all tell me, what are the Wolfpacks and what impact have they made in this season?
Thank you so much, Ashley. So if you've been joining these mass calls for some time, you've heard about it before. You know, we put out early in the year a call to organize together by forming wolf packs. These are small groups that expand themselves with other WFPers like you in states across the country. The aim is to be working together, to be building the party of our dreams, and doing that with working people together. And I'm happy to say that over the past several weeks, our wolf packs have been hard at work across the country. They're creating local hubs that are recruiting new WFP members. They're taking direct action on behalf of working people and with working people. And from these mass calls that you're on now, more than 1,500 of you answered that call, signed up, joined orientations, connected with other WFPers across the country. In states, many different states. And I'm only going to be able to highlight a few things here and keep our time short. But I wanted to highlight that what this is coming into is a collaborative strategy, part of our success, and it's a momentum of local organizing that's also helping what you just heard Isabel highlight in the federal fight back, holding our Congress accountable, giving them the spine that they need right now. So I just want to briefly highlight a few things that we're excited to be seeing local leaders take upon themselves. Number one, we're going to hear it. You heard a shout out to the Prairie Dogs in Illinois. This group has hosted in-person welcome gatherings early in February, brought tons and tons of people together, had a few brews, and also learned about the WFP. And they're building a pack of more than 100 members already. They're extending their reach with virtual events, and you're going to hear a little bit more on that in just a few minutes from Uj. Also want to shout out our Minnesota Wolfpack. They've been gathering together with also hosting welcome gatherings, have several dozen attendees. They're hosting in-person events in Twin Cities, and they're helping to bolster efforts in local action and supporting neighboring states like Wisconsin. Washington, D.C., this PAC is gaining momentum. They already have more than 50 members. They're hosting in-person events, multiple actions together, joining national protests and partnering with groups like Defend DC. And in Maryland, again, shout out to Destiny and Kramer representing our Maryland Wolfpack there. They've been actively a huge part of supporting one of our first endorsements of the year, Aisha Braveboy, running for Prince George's County Executive, a very important race to be a local bulwark. And in Seattle, our Solidarity PAC has been kicking off organizing efforts to reclaim Seattle City Council and really ensure robust local representation. So they're busy at work right now, recruiting WFPers, getting out to local canvases, and they're going to flip those seats. So again, this is not comprehensive, but it's just a good sample of some of the work that WFPers are taking it upon themselves to do. They're stepping up exactly how we need to. So to take us into the next section, I want to introduce Sam. Sam, you got an introduction already from Ashley, but I just want to say, Sam has been the real head and heart of the Wolfpack program. He's been tireless and enthusiastic and bringing in the joy, damn it, into what we're doing and organizing. As you said, Sam is the national distributed organizer. Sam, tell us a little bit about what's to come.
Thanks, Dylan. Happy to be here. More than 1,500 of you have signed up during our mass calls to learn, get plugged in, and become part of this dynamic movement. Our orientations have brought together hundreds of WFPers across states, really helping you connect, plan actions, and start recruiting your own communities. These sessions have been critical in laying the foundation for local actions and forging strong bonds among party members. And our Wolfpacks are fueling the party's national efforts by building strong representation at our national fight back phone banks, where your voices are echoing across the country, attending actions at the district offices of our Congress people, ensuring that our message reaches the halls of power, really contributing stories that capture our collective struggle and successes, among many of which are making their way into the national press. Working with hundreds of WFPers across various states has underscored the power of community-based organizing. Our approach has been both strategic and deeply relational. PAC leaders have united in weekly huddles every Wednesday going until March 19th to really share best practices, coordinate actions, and support one another. Our comprehensive resources, from Wolfpack Leader Guide to tailored meeting templates, have been pivotal in ensuring every PAC is set up for success. And the journey of forming a Wolfpack has been both methodical and organic. Starting with the initial team PACs, recruitment drives, and intensive outreach through calls, texts, and relational organizing, we quickly moved into hosting welcome gatherings. These events not only increase our numbers, but also energize local communities in setting the stage for future organizing and community-based action. Whether it's powering national phone banks, organizing actions at local district offices, or rallying support on digital platforms like Slack, every local effort feeds into this broader strategy, building a resilient, inclusive movement for working people. The movement we've built so far is just the beginning. Our mass call signups, dynamic orientations, and tireless local actions are really what's paving the way for an even more impactful organizing approach during these critical election moments. Moving forward, we're going to continue to strengthen our communication through regular huddles and shared resources. We're going to debrief with Wolfpacks as they make plans to support our state and federal fights over the next coming months. We're going to launch new Wolfpacks in key states like Ohio, Georgia, and Wisconsin. And if you're in one of those states, we want to hear from you. Connect with us by signing up to join a Wolfpack. We're going to drop the link in the chat. These past few weeks have really shown that when hundreds of committed WFPers come together, we build a movement, one that transforms local energy into a national force. Our Wolfpacks are laying the groundwork for real change through relational organizing, fueling everything from national phone banks to targeted actions. And I have so much pleasure to now introduce Uj Patel, who is a dynamic leader with one of our Illinois wolf pack, the Prairie Dogs. Uj's journey from a modest immigrant upbringing to leading his pack embodies the power of building strong and personal relationships that build the party. He's at the forefront of mobilizing WF peers to support critical races in Wisconsin now, while also laying a strong foundation for major contests in early 2026 Illinois. So I'll pass it to you, Uj.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Illinoisans that are out there. I know you guys are here making your voices heard everywhere. A little bit about myself. You know, I believed in the American dream kind of growing up because of my immigrant family. My parents moved to the US a year before I was born. They came from a really rural part of India with absolutely nothing, and we lived in a multi-family kind of unit, 2 bedrooms. Um, it was a source of pride, kind of seeing my parents work multiple minimum wage jobs and then save each penny over 2 decades to build and buy their own business. My parents were incredibly hard workers and did so much for it. But eventually, like when I looked back on it as I grew up, was infuriating to me because my parents' employers preyed on them as non-English speakers. Uh, they underpaid them for years because they could not leave their jobs. The lack of childcare meant that I had to take care of my little sister after school, which was tough as a child as I missed a lot of opportunities that had others had. It was hard to navigate college decisions, which were tough, and I always felt behind, which meant worse opportunities post graduation. Working families like mine struggle to survive, and we have so many problems that are solvable. But the current system prioritizes the status quo. I wanted another option, and that's when my partner showed me WFP. WFP feels different. WFP is focused on building power from the ground up, and they're willing to work through the current conditions to get great candidates elected. You can point to actual seats that are results of WFP actions, unlike any other potential third party. Working families need a bulwark for them, and WFP shows me that they're committed to being that through the strategic actions they're taking and the policies they're focusing on. The 2024 election was kind of the straw that broke my back. I knew I had to jump off the sidelines, but I didn't know what to do initially. So I joined some welcome gatherings. I listened, I shouted, put stuff into the chat. I hope you guys are doing that right now. At the welcome gatherings, they talked about wolf packs. So I decided to do some research and I found a YouTube clip actually that Dylan posted about Maurice talking about them. He said something that kind of stuck with me. Our relational capital is the most powerful capital we have on this planet, and we need organizers, not activists. At that point, I decided to kind of raise my hand to be a Wolfpack leader because that's something I can do every day. I talk to my friends, I talk to my family members, I have coworkers, and our trust and connections to address issues that concern us creates that power. I can help convince them to get off the sideline, to vote, to build, to block, do the things that we need. The best part of this journey, though, has been meeting some of the best people in the world. It's easy to get lost in the quicksand that is doom scrolling, thinking about how messed up society can be, just the weight of oppression that physically manifests in the seat. Uh, but the folks that I met are just amazing. They energize me. They show me that there are people out there in the community that care in the community that I live in, and I'm sure many of them will become lifelong friends. I mean, every time Ivy posts, it's amazing to see the energy she brings. Bill, every time he executes, is amazing. Talking to new people, David, Phil, all of these amazing folks that do incredible things daily.
I need y'all to give it up one time for Dylan, Sam, and Ooge, all of the prairie dogs that are on the call. Y'all, they just shared with you the exciting work that WFP is doing to create on-ramps for people like all of you to get involved in meaningful party building work with people in your area. Right now, we're focused on building out this Wolfpack infrastructure in a few states, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Georgia. If you're not in one of those states, never fear. You can still plug into a WFP welcome gathering to meet other people from around the country and find out how you can get involved. We'll drop links for the welcome gatherings and drive people to build new wolf packs in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Georgia in the chat right now as well. Shout out to Molly for also dropping the link where you can go and search to see if there is a wolf pack near you. There probably is. And if not, again, come join the welcome gatherings. We can't wait to welcome you to your new political home. And as an added bonus, we want to share with you a member survey that you can fill out. Maybe you don't have any hot elections coming up right now in your city or state, but chances are you will at some point. So if you fill out that survey, it's going to help us keep you on the list to get you involved when there is something popping off where you live. So again, you can join a welcome gathering. If you're in Ohio, Wisconsin, or Georgia, we want to learn and love with you so we can join up in a wolf pack in your state and take some action in critical elections that are happening this year. And then again, last but certainly not least, complete the member survey so that we can get you connected to upcoming elections, opportunities, and actions in your state. Okay, y'all. After all of this information gathering, after all of these calls to action, after all these incredible speakers, we have come to the end of yet another powerful evening. I want to thank every single one of the speakers. I want to thank Geronimo and the On Point team for producing. I want to thank our friends at Free Speech TV, our interpretation team, all the folks that have been dropping links in the chat, and every single one of you for not regarding it robbery to be with us tonight. Remember that we've been here before. If you were feeling disoriented coming into this call, overwhelmed, unsure about what is to be done, I hope you feel a bit more like you have your feet underneath you now. If you came into this call ready to fight and looking for concrete things to do, I hope you got what you needed as well. Remember, there's no one coming to save us but us. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and the time for waiting is over. It's time for doing. This is how it's always been. We've won in very difficult conditions before, and we are going to win in difficult conditions again. But winning will require discipline and strategic actions that we commit to taking together. Party building is critical to it. I'm blessed beyond measure to be taking those steps, these calls to action with each and every one of you. As new developments unfold, we'll be reaching back out for more opportunities like this to gather, to share information, to make meaning of the moment, and to get concrete calls to action from leaders that you can trust. If you want to make sure that you get the bat signal when it's time to gather again, be sure that you have texted mass call to 30403. And I saw a question about how long can we do that for the foreseeable future. So tell your friends, organize your friends to text mass call to 30403 to get the calls to action and the bat signal when it's time to gather again. Until that night comes, until we meet again, keep your eyes on the week of March 16th when Congress will be back in their home districts because we have more stuff in the works. Stay strong, my friends.